Liam asks, do you think Jameis Winston's LASIK procedure bring his touchdown and interception numbers down to 2020? He'll hang up and listen. There's no better time in the year 2020 to throw 20 touchdowns and 20 interceptions. I'm sure Bruce Arians would be happier about that. Yeah, what the hell? Well, LASIK surgery has to help someone, right? I mean, I'll say that, it can't get any worse. He can't get any worse. If he's playing next year and still throwing 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions, something is severely wrong. So I think, yes, the LASIK vision in the year 2020, he'll have 2020 vision, 2020 year, 20 touchdowns, 20 interceptions. It's only fitting. I mean, Jameis Winston is kind of one of those quarterbacks that does perform to the numbers, does make things clean and sexy, right? Like going into the last game, I should say, he had 20 interceptions. And everyone was watching that game in order to see if he breaks the record, gets to that 30-30 club. He threw 2 picks, including the last pass of his career in Tampa Bay. The last pass of the season for the Buccaneers. He threw a pick 6, not only give him 30 interceptions, but break the all-time record for most pick 6s thrown in the season with 7. So I feel like he's a guy that sees history there. For good or for bad, he's going to get it. Right? 29 interceptions, 6 pick 6s. I need one more to make history in both. Screw it. First play overtime, let's throw a pick 6. Game over, season over, career in Tampa Bay over. At least he has that nice 30 for 30 record he can leave with. So absolutely. 20 touchdowns, 20 interceptions. Now that Jameis Winston has 2020 vision playing in the year 2020. So the numbers line up. It definitely will happen. So hopefully a team that needs a quarterback signs him and plays him. Because we need 2020, 2020, 2020 from Jameis Winston. So again, if you have your thoughts at WWSRN radio, _radio, you can comment on the live Periscope feed there or on Facebook, Worldwide Sports Radio Network. So, obviously, we talked a lot about the Patriots and a lot about Tom Brady. I kind of want to change the discussion, at least with some news that broke last week after the show. Of course, what else is new? No news breaks leading into the show or during the show. It's always after the show, and then we always have a few days to kind of sit and marinate on it before we're back on the network here. But some pretty big news. I wouldn't say surprising at this point, but some pretty big news in terms of the NFL and the position that is really at risk now. And the question kind of begs after this happened with Todd Gurley getting cut by the Rams is how do you pay running backs? You know how to pay quarterbacks a lot of money. How do you pay running backs, and what really is their value? Because Todd Gurley is a guy just 20 months ago signed a 4-year, $60 million deal, $45 million guaranteed. Before Ezekiel Elliott signed his massive contract, this was the biggest running back contract in history, I believe, in terms of guarantees. It's a guy who performed up until that point. He's tied for the franchise record in touchdowns with 58. You go back to the year they went to the Super Bowl. He was really, the big catalyst. He had 1,200 rushing yards, led the league with 21 total touchdowns. He was a monster. He was a matchup nightmare. So he was great running the ball. He was great catching the ball to the backfield. It was so hard for teams to kind of defend Todd Gurley that it opened up lanes for tight ends and receivers and really allowed Jared Goff to flourish in that offense for that 1 year. But now you see that, obviously he had a career low in rushing yards last year. And now just 20 months, less than 2 years after he signed that big deal, he was cut by the Rams. And this is not, he's not the only case. This is not a rarity. This is not, this is going to, unfortunately, this is not the exception. This is starting to become the rule. Because you look at other players, especially in these last few years, that have gotten big deals. It has done anything but work out. You look at Le'Veon Bell. He just signed a big deal with the Jets, 4 years, $52.5 million, with 27 of that guaranteed. So he's only been there 1 year, and the offensive line was putrid. And he was coming off a year that he sat out. Remember that. He sat out the entire season in 2018 because he didn't want to play under the franchise tag. Came back with the Jets after that year off. And again, he had his lowest yards and lowest touchdown input, in a full season that he's played of his career. So lowest yards, least amount of touchdowns when he played a full season of his career was the first year after he signed a big contract. Now, again, you can blame the layoff. You can blame the offensive line, which was putrid for the Jets. But it's not exactly when the shelf life is already as short as it is, when you're spending a lot of money as it is on Le'Veon Bell. Not exactly a great sign when he's having career lows the first year after you give him a big deal. David Johnson, we just talked about him when we talked about the losers of NFL free agency in terms of the Texans, right? The Cardinals signed David Johnson to a 3-year, $39 million deal, 13 guaranteed. That contract was an extension. It started last year, and now he's in year 2 of that 3-year deal. And the Cardinals were desperate to get him off the books. Again, just a year after he's signed the deal. He had the lowest output of yards in his career last year. and really was just at this point just cast away for Kenyon Drake, who was brought in halfway through the year for the Cardinals and just kicked David Johnson to the curb. So this is a guy that was a do-it-all back, similar to Le'Veon Bell and Todd Gurley. He can catch the ball in the backfield. He can run between the tackles. He was dynamic. If you're a fantasy football player, which a lot of us are, he was a top 3 pick for 2 or 3 years in a row. Maybe even the number 1 overall pick because he churned out yards. He was great. Gets a big contract for running backs at least. Again, 1 year after that, he's traded, and the Cardinals were basically trying to give him away. Get him off their books, give him away because they had to go elsewhere. Devontae Freeman got a 5-year, $41 million deal with just under half of that, 22 guaranteed, back in 2017. Played 2 games in 2018 because of injuries and really struggled when he played this year in 2019. And you know what? He faced a similar fate to Todd Gurley. He was cut. 3 years left on his deal. He signed in 2017. He played 2 of the 5 years, didn't get halfway through the deal. He was cut. And really the biggest example, and while he's still employed, Jerick McKinnon signed a 4-year, $30 million deal, 16, so basically, again, half of that guaranteed with the 49ers 2 years ago. He's yet to play a game. Now, he's on the roster, and he restructured his deal, so he'll be there this year. But 2 years, so halfway through the deal, he has yet to play 1 game. And his complications from an ACL injury. But all of these players I just listed and just rattled down their contracts and their years and their fate. You know how many are on teams that they signed so far to the 5 guys I listed? 2. And Le'Veon Bell, we'll see what his future is if he has another down year with the Jets. And you already had reports that Adam Gase was not a big fan of the signing to begin with and was maybe even trying to look to trade Bell, at the trade deadline this offseason. So obviously you have a head coach and a running back not on the same page, and you have Jerick McKinnon, who's on the same team because he restructured his deal to lower his cap hit, and he hasn't played a game in 2 years. Devontae Freeman, 5 years, cut 2 years later. David Johnson signed a 3-year contract, traded 1 year into that contract. Todd Gurley signed a 4-year deal, cut 20 months after signing that massive deal. So at least to me, this is a trend, and this is starting to become the rule, not the exception. So now I want to kind of talk about what are the options? Because you see the landscape, and you see the framework. People try to reward their good players, including running backs. Unfortunately, more times than not, because of the physicality and because of the injury rate, these deals don't work out. And at least now you have still teams like the Cowboys signed Zeke to a big deal, 6-year extension with 2 years left. So it's really an 8-year deal. I would be floored if Ezekiel Elliott sees the end of that contract. There's basically almost no way. He'll be lucky if he sees at this rate half of the contract because of the way teams are cutting running backs and kind of getting out from under that salary that they promised to pay them. So at least to me, there's only 2 ways you can go about it now going forward if you want to have a running back and you draft a running back to be legitimate parts of the team. And that is what I just kind of said, draft high and franchise tag him. The Giants took Saquon Barkley at number 2 overall a few years ago. I'm a Penn State guy. I love Saquon Barkley. In his 3 years at Penn State, it was so much fun to watch. He was such an exciting player, and he was a big reason for their success. But at the time when the Giants were drafting, I thought they should have taken a quarterback. I thought they should have taken Sam Darnold. They did not. They took a running back. They tried to win. Now they are already now going to have a decision to make in a few years with Saquon Barkley and what they should do. You draft high and you franchise him because basically that's what the Steelers did with Le'Veon Bell. And so far, at least the returns from what the Jets are getting, it's worked. You draft a guy high so you can get a 5th-year option after you draft him, so you have him for 5 years under your control. You can franchise a player up to 3 years. And sure, it's a hefty salary at the time, but you're making year-by-year commitments. I think teams would be more comfortable giving a running back a decent amount of money, but it's only a 1-year deal, rather than giving them a little lesser money, but committing to them long-term. Because as we know, it's really a year-by-year, right? These running backs can have great 2 or 3 years, drop off a cliff. David Johnson is a great example of that. It was dynamic even up to 2 years ago before injuries kind of cost him a few seasons. And all of a sudden now he's basically thrown in the scrap heap and given away, or at least tried to give it away before they got a great return back, but tried to be given away. Drafting high, especially if you want him in the first round, and franchising them has to be the way, because if you do that, you can get 8 years out of a player. The Panthers or Christian McCaffrey right now are in a weird spot because you know why? They are in the middle of a rebuild, or the thought is that they will be rebuilding. But this is a guy who's dynamic, who can do so many different things. Are you going to give Christian McCaffrey a long-term deal? Face a similar fate to guys of David Johnson, to even Ty Gurley. It's tough. And the only other way I'd say you can do it is by running back by committee, which is you don't take any running back high. You draft all these running backs late. You sign up the scrap heap. You see teams like the Ravens do that. You see teams like the 49ers do that. They don't invest a lot of money into the running back position, but they have 3 or 4 guys they rotate, and they build it through the offensive line. And that way you keep the running back position cheap. You keep them on smaller deals. And especially if you build the running game through the offensive line first and just basically kind of rotate running backs, either late round draft picks or free agents you signed to low, small deals, you could still have a lot of success. And again, 2 of the rushing leaders did it by committee with the Ravens and the 49ers. Had 2, 3, 4 running backs in rotation throughout the year that got a decent amount of carries, and they were dynamic. That's really the only 2 ways you can do it. You can just go really, really, really cheap, go offensive line, or if you want to draft a stud running back, if you want to draft a Saquon Barkley or Christian McCaffrey high, you got to do it. 5th-year option and just franchise will take it year by year because these long-term deals have shown to not work out. And now there's 3 teams coming up that have legitimate decisions to make. The Titans already did with Derrick Henry. Now, they still discuss and say they want to maybe work out a long-term deal. Derrick Henry is not a guy I would want to give a long-term deal to. I understand the Titans built their offense and their identity basically through him, right? You use his physicality, use the offensive line physicality, you mold them together. Those 2 got them to that philosophy, that strategy, got them to the AFC title game this year. Derrick Henry is not a guy you want to pay long-term because you see it once you do. You only get a few good years of these running backs anyway. If you give him a long-term deal with a guy who plays that physical, it's only a matter of time before it ends up biting you in the butt. And now you're either on the hook for a lot of money or your team is hamstrung because you're paying a guy so much money in one position that his value keeps decreasing year after year after year. You have to cut him and just eat the money, or you have to just hold on to him and hope, and again, eat money elsewhere. But even the Saints, Alvin Kamara last year of his deal, Dalvin Cook last year of his deal, both second-round picks. So you don't get that 5th-year option. And these are both, guys that are heavily used both in the pass and the run game. They have decisions to make. And the Giants have a decision to make with Saquon Barkley in a few years. The Panthers have a decision to make with Christian McCaffrey in a few years. These teams are going to have to make some tough deals. And right now, at least the way the landscape is going in the NFL, with throwing the ball being important, with getting franchise quarterbacks and giving them the money, it's just not equitable to give running backs long-term contracts. And it's a shame because the running game is still important. This is not just throwing out and really becoming one-dimensional. There is still a need for good running backs, and there's still a need to have a really solid and efficient running game. The issue is now teams are being able to do that with running backs by committee and cheap running backs they pick up late in the draft. Look at the Chiefs. Chiefs did that no problem. I understand you have Patrick Mahomes, but look at Damian Williams, had a great Super Bowl. The 49ers got to the Super Bowl with a running back by committee. So it's interesting because, unfortunately, these deals, like you said, you look at the landscape, they have not worked out. And there's just it's tough right now to give running backs long-term deals. The best way to do it is if you want to draft a guy high, if you like him so much, if you're the Giants where you see Saquon Barkley and you want him as long as possible and you think he can be a dynamic player, you got to do the Steelers did. You have to franchise him and you have to play hardball. They won't be happy. They might even hold out. But in the long term, it's worth it because I'm sure the Steelers look back at what they did, how they handled the Le'Veon Bell situation, and could smile this because they know that they got the better end of the deal. They did not get hamstrung with money. They did not get caught up. They didn't have to worry about eating money on the salary cap. It worked out for them. That, I think, is going to be the model going forward. I think you'll see it often, at least until the running back position gets back its value. It has no value now. It's cyclical. The NFL is cyclical. It's a copycat league. So once you see one team or 2 teams have a lot of success running the ball and kind of bring back one running back that, kind of bring back that style that led to running backs getting paid so much, maybe then you can start paying them for some long-term deals. Right now, it's not equitable. There's too much risk, and unfortunately for teams, it ends up biting them more than it does helping them.